Hi everyone, welcome to the WoW History Channel. My name is Ron Guth and this channel is about history. If you like historical topics that you may not have ever learned before, and that's the whole purpose of the channel, is to teach you something new. So if you like the channel, hit subscribe please. I just recently broke 100 subscribers, which took me about 8 months to do, and I'll have a video coming up soon about the process of getting there and what it's like after I hit 100, because I know that's a milestone for a lot of YouTubers. But tonight I want to talk about politicians, in particular the fact that politicians don't really have a very good reputation with the voters right now, especially after going through this 2020 election in America. Politicians have a bad rap for any number of reasons. They may not do exactly what they promise to do once they get in office, or they may act in a corrupt manner. I think most of them have good reasons for doing what they do, for running for office and actually serving as a public officer, but they just don't have a very good reputation. One thing I came across the other day was a newspaper from 1793. That's over 200 years ago. That's 218 years now. And in it is a little article, a tiny snippet called The Voter. And I guess it's part one. I haven't seen part two yet, but when I read part one, I thought, wow, not much has changed in 218 years. They didn't like politicians back then either. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll show the snippet on the screen, but I'll also read it to you and add a little bit of context to it so that you understand exactly what they're saying. And I think you'll be surprised at the public's view of politicians back in 1793. Here's the masthead from the Columbian Sentinel, published in Boston, Massachusetts on March 16th, 1793. On the second page, in the last column, is a tiny article called The Voter, number 1, Every Man to His Mule Again. It starts out, election is close by. A seat in the legislature is again at stake. Now you'll notice in the printing here, the first letter of many of the words that should be S is actually printed as an F, and that's one of the little quirks that they had back then. It makes it kind of difficult to read things, but once you get used to it, it's a lot easier to run through it. He who can shake hands the most, he who can dupe us by insinuations as unmeaning as they are insincere, he who can talk largely of his own importance must have it, it being the seat. And when obtained, what is it? It's a seat whereon many a fool has sat. So you can tell right up in the first paragraph that it's not going well for the politicians. The animals whom we call rulers are queer creatures. Before election, they are your most obedient, humble servants to every voter, and when they are seated in the assembly for the first time, very harmless, never opening their heads, unless like Balaam's ass, pressed into a narrow place, and after a second election, wisdom dwells with them. Quote, their mouths they cannot ope, but out there flies a trope, end quote. And that's basically saying that whenever they open their mouth, out come talking points. And the whole weight of government hangs upon their shoulders. A third election gives them an understanding of the specific difference between rulers and ruled, and intrigue upon intrigue marks the whole line of conduct afterwards. Why these people are so warm in the pursuit of offices, I cannot conceive. That there should be persons fond of the first offices of state is not unaccountable. £300 or £400 per annum and 6 pence perquisites by the gross are not contemptible profits. In other words, it was pretty good money. But the honor of being a representative or an assistant is a slim business, and the emolument still more slim. There is some fascination in it. I wish they would but hush. In other words, I wish they would just be quiet. Obviously, not much has changed in the public's attitude towards politicians since 1793. Today, politicians are often viewed negatively, and in this article, we see the progression of a perhaps honest politician starting out and becoming a very big-headed politician by the third election. The first election, the new elected official doesn't really know what they're doing. They're learning as they go along, and they kind of keep their mouth shut as they progress through the first term. By the second term, now all of a sudden they've got the talking points down, and as this gentleman writes, every time they open their mouth, something comes out that's a trope or a talking point. By the third election, this is a very big change. The elected official now knows the difference between the rulers, who are the politicians, and the ruled, who are the voters. And all that means is that on the third term, they have gotten very used to the system. They know how to game the system, and they use it to their advantage and not necessarily to the voters' advantage. So maybe this is a early call for term limits, but in any event, it's clear that this writer did not like politicians. So thank you very much for coming along for this video. And again, in the future, I'll be pulling more stuff out from early source documents, stuff that strikes me as being interesting, and hopefully you'll find it interesting too. See you next time. Bye-bye.